When you look back at the history of Japanese RPGs, there are two companies that come to the forefront: Squaresoft and Enix. They're both known for creating Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest, respectively, the two top-selling JRPG franchises of all time. Well, excluding a certain monster battling series, that is. Digimon, rival Pokemon. Even though they both were at the top of their field with JRPGs, they sort of represented different philosophies and ways of thinking about the genre. While Squaresoft was all about constantly innovating and trying to experiment, Enix, on the other hand, wanted to stick with what was tried and true. In fact, it was actually Square's love for wanting to try new ideas that led to them needing to merge with Enix in the first place. And yes, I specifically say needing, not wanting. You see, by the late 90s, after their absolutely historic run throughout that decade, Squaresoft was on top of the world. Final Fantasy VII cemented themselves as the kings of the PlayStation, a title they would never lose. With the release of Final Fantasy IX at the turning of a decade in 2000, it was pretty much a victory lap. I mean, that cast was doing Coca-Cola commercials, for God's sake. They were certified A-listers in the video game world.
Coca-Cola.
Square maybe took the whole A-lister thing a little too literally though, and thought, what if we became actual A-listers? Thus, Square Pictures was born. They wanted to create the first photorealistic computer-animated feature film ever. This lofty endeavor did of course not come without a hefty price, both in time and money. Just about 4 years and 137 million gil, in fact. Yeah, they were pretty much going all in, dude. They definitely had high hopes, too. They had plans for the fictional protagonist of the movie to be like the first artificial actress that would star in other movies after this. Like, geez, let's calm down a bit here. The movie's not even out yet. I think this kind of goes to show where their minds were at during this time, thinking they could do no wrong.
Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Yes, when the ego is left unchecked and you're surrounded by yes men, just like a shadow, the inevitable downfall follows closely behind, just waiting for you to fall victim to your own hubris. In other words, Icarus flew too close to the sun and caught that Fiasco spell face first. What was supposed to be the catalyst in launching Squaresoft to unprecedented heights ended up being a ticking time bomb that would blow up in their face and send their Hollywood dreams crashing back to reality. It was a certified bomb. It barely grossed over half its budget. I can at least attest I did my part though and saw it in theaters. However, I was only like 10 at the time and a lot of it went over my head.
Because we see the same thing during surgery, when using bioetheric lasers on phantom particles. Do we not?
Yes, indeed we do.
My dad took me to see it and was pretty bored himself and actually fell asleep. And that was the main problem, I think. Like, who was this really for? For fans of the series, besides some thematic similarities, it really felt nothing like a Final Fantasy game. And for non-fans, it was kind of just a pretty generic and boring, albeit really pretty, sci-fi movie. Try to appeal to everyone and you appeal to no one. It wasn't a bad movie by any means, but it was a bad Final Fantasy movie. Needless to say, Squaresoft took a pretty big financial hit. After years of experimentation, one eventually backfired and now they were hurting for some money. Enter Enix. Yeah, maybe their traditionalist ways didn't excite Squaresoft, but they had something they wanted: financial stability. You see, Dragon Quest was a money-printing machine in Japan, so Enix was doing just fine. While Squaresoft was out hitting the blackjack tables here and there, Enix was steadily padding out their 401k for like a decade. Before you go calling Squaresoft a gold digger though, this wasn't just a one-way arrangement. They had something Enix wanted too: fame. Well, really more global presence, but fame worked better for the analogy. While Squaresoft may have fallen on some hard times, at least people knew Squaresoft. Outside of Japan, Enix was almost a nobody. Their flagship series, Dragon Quest, was not that popular in America. Hell, 5 and 6 never even came out in America. Its big comeback game in the West, 7, didn't go that well either. I mean, it's a good game, but coming out near the end of the PS1's lifecycle looking more like a Super Nintendo title, it's no surprise most Americans flock to the shinier Final Fantasy. Like, it's November 2001. Would you rather play Dragon Quest VII on the PS1, or wait just literally 1 month and play Final Fantasy X on the PS2? I rest my case. They both had something the other wanted and set out to acquire.
Square News!
And on April 1st, 2003, they did just that. Enix officially absorbed Squaresoft and became Square Enix. In hindsight, April Fool's was kind of a weird day to announce this, but I digress. I found it interesting that despite Enix being the one to absorb Squaresoft, it was Square president Yoichi Wada that they appointed as the new president of Square Enix. Maybe he had a better long-term plan, I don't know, but regardless, Squaresoft and Enix as individual entities was a thing of the past. Yes, two rivals, now turned friends. The old if you can't beat 'em, join 'em trope brought to real life. They brought us a lot of classics on their own, but what about after the merging? Well, that's exactly what we're going to be taking a look at in this video. This is essentially a part 3 to our videos on Squaresoft in the 90s and Enix in the 90s. Yeah, about time, I know. In the Squaresoft video, we just focused on their RPGs in the 90s, whereas in the Enix video, we talked about every single game they published, period, that decade. In this video, we're just going to focus on the games they developed themselves. If I talked about all the games they published as well, this video would be like 3 hours long. Plus, the point is to talk about the games that have like that classic Square magic. That said, there are a few exceptions I want to clarify though. 1. Even though Enix was a publisher only, I'm gonna make an exception for all Dragon Quest titles. Some of these were actually developed by other companies, like Level 5 for example. However, it just wouldn't feel right not to include them here. 2. I'm only gonna talk about their RPGs and their RPG adjacents. I'm sorry, All-Star Pro Wrestling and Mario Hoops 3-on-3 fans, this is not your video. 3. I'm gonna be going by Japanese dates, so if a game came out between January 2000 and December 2009, it's fitting for this video. Oh, and for that matter, there will be some Japanese exclusive games as well. Alright, with all that out of the way, I think we can go ahead and get started. Just sit back and relax, grab some snacks, we're gonna be here for a while. Cue the intro.
The light is your guide.
Dream is what keeps you going.
Now is the time to shape your story. Your fate is in your hands.
Okay, so, considering the merger wasn't until 2003, obviously we have the first few years of them solo. First, starting with Squaresoft's Vagrant Story.
近づけば近づくほどそれはロールプレイングアドベンチャーベイグラントストーリー
This one came out for the PS1 in February 2000 in Japan and May 2000 in North America. It was directed by industry legend Yasumi Matsuno, the absolute beast behind previous titles such as Final Fantasy Tactics, Tactics Ogre, and Ogre Battle. His games are often known for having mature, complex narratives that focus on socio-political themes. Vagrant Story is no exception. It easily has some of the best writing and cinematic presentation on the console. The music is also quite excellent as well. It was composed by Hitoshi Sakamoto. He was a frequent collaborator with Matsuno and always fit his vibe perfectly. The combat in Vagrant Story is kind of like this weird mishmash of real-time and turn-based where you target enemies' body parts and try to chain attacks together in a rhythm, and yeah, it's quite complex and unique. It's pretty hard too, with a steep learning curve. It was an obvious choice to be in our video about difficult JRPGs that will challenge you. It's not for everyone, but if you value a deep narrative and a complex battle system, It's one of the finest on the console. In July 2000 in Japan and November 2000 in North America, Squaresoft dropped their swan song for the PS1, Final Fantasy IX. Not only my personal favorite in the series, but also series creator Hironobu Sakaguchi's as well.
I like 9, of course.
Final Fantasy IX is the best. Well, you heard it here from the man himself.
So yeah, it's pretty much an objective fact it's the best in the series. Nah, in all seriousness though, it's not hard to see why it's his favorite. It was a culmination of everything in the series up until that point. It was also a throwback to its more medieval fantasy roots, which Sakaguchi clearly likes. It truly was a Final Fantasy for Final Fantasy fans. I mean, the first 4 characters you get are just fleshed out evolutions of the Thief, Warrior, Black Mage, and White Mage classes from the very first game. Vivi specifically might be like the best character in the entire series. One of them easily for sure. Don't let his cute design fool you. He has one of the deepest character arcs in the series regarding existentialism and finding meaning in life. That same mentality kind of applies to the game as a whole. Critically and commercially, it was always received very well. However, discourse among fans was a bit more varied. After 7 and 8 gave us the most mature character design in the series, some people felt that 9 looked a little bit too kiddie in comparison. I mean, superficially, it's a valid critique. These designs aren't for everyone. However, when it comes to the themes they actually cover, they're still some of the deepest and most mature in the series. Aesthetically, the game just oozes charm. These are some of the prettiest pre-rendered backgrounds ever put in a video game. It's like you're playing an interactive painting. That's how they would make them actually. They would paint on top of static CG renders. I do also gotta give credit to the music. It's the last time Nobuo Uematsu solo composed a Final Fantasy title, and he went out with a bang. Not only some of the best music in the series, but in video games period. Man, I could just go on all day about this one, but I'll end it here. I'll never forget the first day I got it and playing it all night up until like Dolly Village. Those were the days. Hats off to my favorite Final Fantasy of all time. In August 2000, Dragon Quest VII released for the PS1. Well, in Japan, that is. It didn't come out in the States until November 2001. I already explained why that led to it not being as popular over here. It also kinda goes to show how Enix didn't really prioritize their American audience. In all honesty though, even if it came out earlier, I'm not sure if it would have helped. For better or for worse, Dragon Quest VII is an extremely slow-paced game. No exaggeration, maybe even the slowest in the genre. It takes a few hours to get into your first fight, and over 20 hours to unlock the class system. Yeah, you can beat the entirety of Chrono Trigger before you even unlock the central gameplay mechanic here. Pretty wild, I know. The class system is extremely fun though, I will say. But yeah, the slower pacing really helps you take in the game's world, I feel. It really feels like a grand adventure. I mean, dear God it should, the main story is over 100 hours long. I actually think it is the single longest JRPG out there. Oh yeah, I should probably point out who actually developed this one. It was a developer called Heartbeat. They only made this game, Dragon Quest VI, remakes of 3 and 4, and that was it. Yeah, pretty short-lived history, but hey, they still left their mark, for sure. Alright, we have our first Japan-only release of the video with Hataraku Chocobo. It came out in September of that year for the WonderSwan, which also was a Japan-only handheld system. This one is a simulation game where you manage a chocobo ranch. You assign different tasks to different chocobos, and Yeah, it looks pretty Jokorific. Alright, that was super stupid, I don't know why I just said that, but look at this magazine ad. And pretty aesthetic looking, right? That about makes up for that, yeah? No? Okay, well, I don't have much else to say here, so let's move on. In December of that year, the original Final Fantasy got a remake also on the WonderSwan. It featured a graphical overhaul and many quality of life improvements. While we're on topic, Square actually had quite a few remakes for the WonderSwan. Just to save time later, I'm gonna list them all here. Final Fantasy II, Final Fantasy IV, Final Fantasy Legend, otherwise known as Makai Taoshi Saga, Romancing Saga, Front Mission, and Anjuku Hero. We do have some WonderSwan originals coming up, but more on those in a bit. For now, to finish off the year, we have The Bouncer. It wouldn't come out in North America though until March of next year. This one was actually co-developed by Squaresoft and Dream Factory, the team behind the Tobal series and Air Guys. In fact, early on, it was even referred as Air Guys 2. The game received a good amount of hype at launch as it was one of the earliest PS2 titles to show off the console's graphical power. Now, how was it in actuality? It was fine.
It's not over yet. I'll teach you a thing or two about a woman's wrath the next time we meet.
It's like a beat-em-up with light RPG elements and is a prime example of style over substance. It does have Tetsuya Nomura at probably his most unhinged character design though, so there's that. To start off 2001, in March, Dragon Quest Monsters 2, Terra's Adventure and Kobe's Journey would release for the Game Boy Color. Not until September in North America though. I initially thought this was the last title to go under the Dragon Warrior moniker in the West, but I was wrong, that was Dragon Quest 7. I meant to mention that earlier. But yeah, these two versions are largely the same. You play as Kobe in one and Terra in the other. Oh, and Kobe only goes on a journey. Terra gets an adventure. Not much else to say here. They're monster capturing and battling games. They're fun. Later that month, Wildcard came out for the WonderSwan Color. This is a card-based RPG where everything uses cards. Battles, navigation, yeah, everything. It's pretty complex and apparently was an inspiration for Unlimited Saga. Probably one of the most hated JRPGs I know of. The art is gorgeous though, I will say that. In July of this year, Final Fantasy Chronicles released for the PS1, only in North America. It's a compilation of Final Fantasy IV and Chrono Trigger. These ports added some FMV sequences, and they're pretty cool. By the way, if you like PS1 FMVs, we have an hour-long video on the topic, check it out if interested. This version of Final Fantasy IV retains the difficulty of the original Japanese release, which was harder than the Super Nintendo North American release. I can attest to that as I remember playing this as a kid and getting my ass kicked. This version of Chrono Trigger is probably worse though. The longer loading times are just long. That's really all you need to make it worse. It's still not a bad way to play it though. Later that month, taking it back to Japan, Blue Wing Blitz would come out for the WonderSwan Color. This one's a tactical RPG with aerial combat. It adds a pretty unique take. You can change your altitude, you can take evasive maneuvers, there's a finite amount of fuel and ammunition, you can upgrade your aircraft after missions, and yeah, it's kind of interesting. A trailer of the game was actually included on a bonus disc of the Japanese release of Final Fantasy X. Which, speaking of... In that same month, Final Fantasy X came out for the PS2. It wouldn't get released in America though until December, just a week before Christmas. Yeah, they hit that holiday window perfectly. When this game came out, it was like the definition of cool. Cool box art, cool graphics. I mean hell, it even gave us a new sport. Be honest, how many of you tried playing Blitzball as a kid and was like, okay, yeah, this concept just does not work. It was one of the earliest, must-own titles on the system. In my opinion, it's the last game in the series that really felt like a true Final Fantasy game. I know that some people say that about 9 and that 10 was the start of the series changing, and I do get that. It's a lot more linear for that matter, and there's no overworld map. However, it still retains the spirit of the series, I feel. I mean, it's got turn-based battles, and that counts for something, right? It's so snappy and fast-paced, and dude, it's great. My favorite combat in the series, in fact. Plus, I don't agree with the critique that the linear hallways are just as bad as Final Fantasy XIII's. First of all, there's multiple towns to explore, something that FF13 lacked, and even when there are hallways, it just does a better job at disguising them. I mean, pretty hard not to with this immaculate, tropical, Asian Islander-inspired setting. It's easily one of my favorite atmospheres in any game ever. It was the main inspiration for our video on ranking the vibes of the Final Fantasy series. As an overall game, Final Fantasy X is just excellent though. Great emotional story, super memorable characters, awesome music. It has it all. It's my second favorite game in the series and is an all-time classic. Starting off 2002, in January, Japan got Final Fantasy X International. This is basically the definitive version of the game with some extra content. The PAL region would actually get this version later this year, however, North America wouldn't get it until the remasters the following decade. A couple months later in March, one of the weirdest collaborations in video game history would take place. Final Fantasy meets Disney?
When you walk away, you don't hear me say, please, oh baby, don't go. Simple and clean is the way that you're making me feel tonight. It's hard to let it go.
Kingdom Hearts for PlayStation 2, rated E for everyone. Squaresoft.
Yeah, Kingdom Hearts took a lot of people by surprise. The lore behind it is pretty interesting. And no, I don't mean the in-game lore, as I don't think anyone could tell you what's going on there. I mean the lore on how the series even came to be. It started with a dream. Hironobu Sakaguchi and senior producer Shinji Hashimoto were having a discussion about how they wanted to create a game with full 3D movement like Super Mario 64. However, they thought, well, even if we did, we would need like a Disney character or something to rival Mario's popularity. Yeah, true. Well, it was a good idea. Tetsuya Nomura overheard their convo and was like, well, if we are able to get this off, I'd love to lead it. They were like, okay, yeah, that's cool. And that was that. For a bit. Well, it just so happened that Destiny was still in store. You see, Square and Disney shared the same building in Japan, and one day, Shinji Hashimoto ran into a Disney executive in the elevator. He legit did the whole classic elevator pitch, and it actually worked. I mean, obviously, I wouldn't be talking about it here if not. As one could imagine, given the collaboration, there was a ton of hype behind it. Like, dude, that commercial was simple and clean, went so hard. As far as the actual game goes, yeah, it was pretty good. Destiny Islands is one of the coziest opening locations ever. Man, I just love the whole tropical beach aesthetic that was really popular around this time. Love it so much, we even made a video on it. But yeah, this was only the beginning. We'll be revisiting this series numerous times later. A couple months later, Dragon Quest Monsters 1 and 2 would get a remake for the PS1, only in Japan. These came bundled together and are the definitive versions of the games. And that's really all I have to say here. That same month, the mainline Final Fantasy series went in its boldest direction yet. In a similar way that life was heading, Final Fantasy XI took things online.
またやってる。お兄ちゃん一人で遊んでばっか。
一人じゃねえよ。
オンライン RPG ファイナルファンタジー11プレイステーション。
Online games were really taking off around this time, and this series was no exception to wanting to try it out. Sakaguchi remained firm that the game not be called Final Fantasy Online though. He felt that it would make it seem like a spin-off of lesser importance that didn't have the same consideration as the mainline titles. It absolutely did, and its sales reflected that. It wasn't an immediate monumental success, however, by 2012, it was the most profitable title in the series. Ah yes, the slow and steady burner. Its monthly subscription of $11.95 has not changed since 2002. Speaking of that, its release dates were kind of weird. In Japan it came out on the PS2 first, then the PC. However, in the West it came out on the PC first, and then the PS2. Yeah, just reverse I guess, not that weird, but interesting nonetheless. The PS2 version requiring a lot of extra stuff to even run may have factored into this, I don't know. What I do know though is I have not played this game. So yeah, I don't have much else to say here. To those of you that have poured countless hours into this game, that's a life I didn't live, but I'm sure it was fun as hell. Throughout the decade, it would get several expansions. Rise of the Zillarts in 2003, Chains of Promethea in 2004, Treasures of Odd Urgon in 2006, and Wings of the Goddess in 2007. On Halloween this year, Final Fantasy 1 and 2 would get remasters for the PS1. They would release under the compilation Final Fantasy Origins in North America the next year though. These are basically just enhanced versions of the WonderSwan versions. The new FMVs look pretty sweet too. On that same day, Enix released Tornico's Great Adventure 3 for the PS2. It was co-developed by Chunsoft and Matrix Software and is the third entry in their Dragon Quest Mystery Dungeon series. Unlike the last entry, this one never saw a Western release though. For those that don't know, Tornico is a popular Dragon Quest character, first appearing in Dragon Quest IV. He's a hard-working, middle-aged merchant just trying to provide for his wife and kids, so he resonated with a lot of older fans. 2 years later, this title would get remade for the Game Boy Advance, however, that version wasn't received quite as well. To finish off the year, December brought us Unlimited Saga. Yeah, I mentioned this one earlier and yeah, it's certainly a RPG. The Saga series has always been pretty convoluted and complex, however, this one took things to the next level. It kind of plays like a board game and yeah, I don't know what the hell's going on here. Like nothing is explained in the game. There is a reason why though. The Japanese version came with an extensive guide that explained all of the game's obtuse mechanics. The English version did not. So yeah, from the start it was already doomed. And the scores reflected that. Hey, at least it looks and sounds really nice though.
Advance.
現実なんて消えてしまえばいい。僕らはそう思ってた。それは僕らが作った剣と魔法の世界。ファイナルファンタジータクティクスアドバンス。君だけの冒険を描け。
Alright, finally moving on to 2003. On February 14th, Final Fantasy Tactics Advance came out for the Game Boy Advance. It's not a direct sequel to the original Tactics though. While Yasumi Matsuno created the concept, he didn't really have a lot to do with the game outside of that. And it definitely shows. It's still a great game, it's just tonally, it's a lot more kiddie and not as mature in comparison. The gameplay, however, is very deep and sufficiently challenging. A lot of people felt it was an improvement on the original. This one isn't remembered as fondly as its predecessor, but if you know what you're in for, it's still a top-tier experience. The next month in March, the Final Fantasy series would get its first sequel with Final Fantasy X-2.
まだ見ぬ仲間広がる世界初めてのコンビニ特化そしてユーナのストラップ付き 初めての言うなもん。
コンビニで
This was actually the last game developed by Square before the merger. In fact, by the time it came to America, it was already under the Square Enix label. Right off the bat, it was pretty clear to see they were taking things in a different direction. It featured a all-female playable cast and a very heavy J-pop vibe. There's nothing wrong with this at all, I do love me some J-pop, but yeah, it's just not what a lot of fans probably wanted. This random YouTube comment always makes me laugh. I'm not trying to hate on the game though, it's still reviewed very well. The whole dress sphere system is a lot of fun.
Game Boy Advance.
This brings us to the last game Enix published before the merger, Dragon Quest Caravan Heart for the Game Boy Advance. This is the third entry in the Dragon Quest Monster series. It stars Prince Kiefer from Dragon Quest VII. It serves as a prequel to that game in fact. Unlike the previous titles though, this one never left Japan. The first game they would officially develop under the new Square Enix label would be the all-time classic Hanjuku Hero Tai 3D. Now this is a Japanese-only release from a long-running Japanese-only series. It's a real-time strategy game with a very wacky and humorous tone, as you can clearly see. Oh yeah, and this one came out on June 26th, my birthday, which is cool. To me, and other people with his birthday. So a lot of people actually.
水よりも優しく光よりも眩しい新しいタイプのファイナルファンタジーファイナルファンタジークリスタルクロニクル
The first Square Enix title that got a Western release was Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles in August for the GameCube. This was a multiplayer action RPG, and if you ask me, it was really kind of mid. Yeah, sorry to all the Crystal Chronicle fans out there, but I don't know, I just never really got into this one that much. I think the world design and especially the music are really nice, however, I just don't think it's that fun to play. Kind of a nothing burger story, too. Critically, it did pretty well though, so I don't know. What do I know? At the end of the month, Sword of Mana released for the Game Boy Advance. This was actually developed by the studio Brownie Brown, which was founded by former Square employees who worked on the Mana series. This was their second game after Magical Vacation. Sword of Mana reviewed decently upon release. A lot of 7s, so, you know, nothing crazy. For Game Boy Advance, action RPG standards, it's pretty good. However, in comparison to the rest of the Mana series, it's probably the weakest thus far. The next month, Japan would get Kenshin Dragon Quest Yomigairishi Densetsu no Ken. And if I mispronounced that, I'm sorry. So, this is actually a television game that does not require a separate console. It uses a motion-sensor toy sword as a controller. You can attack vertically, horizontally, and diagonally, all different attacks by the way, and you can also cast spells and block enemy attacks. So yeah, it was kind of like the Wii before that even came out. Beat it by a few years in fact. It sold over 500,000 units and proved to be a big hit in Japan. In October, the first Front Mission would get remade for the PlayStation. This version was called Front Mission First. It featured new content and a new playable scenario. It's a quality mecha tactical RPG and definitely worth playing. In 2007, this would get ported with even more content to the DS, and unlike the previous versions, this one actually made it to the West. Just wanted to save some time and mention this one now. In November, Japan would get Slime Mori Mori Dragon Quest Shogeki no Shippodan. This was the first entry in the Slime sub-series and was developed by Toes. You play as the iconic slime in an overhead, action-adventure, light-hearted romp. This one for the GBA never left Japan. However, the next entry would. More on that one in a bit though.
I want to know what gives you your strength. Now show me.
Front Mission 4th.
The last game Square Enix would release in 2003 would be Front Mission 4 for the PS2. It wouldn't come out in America till the next year though. This was actually the top-selling game during the week of Christmas in Japan. It's not hard to see why, it's a great game. It had the highest production quality in the series thus far with deep and complex gameplay to boot. Some critics felt it was maybe even a bit too complex. It reviewed pretty well, just with the caveat that, yeah, this may not be for everyone.
This is hour 6. Are we done?
Yes, hour 6. She got it so good, didn't she, Arrow 2?
Alright, the first game Square Enix would release in 2004 would be a remake of Dragon Quest V for the PS2, only in Japan. This version was co-developed by Matrix Software and Art Piazza. As you can see, this is a complete 3D overhaul of the Super Famicom version. It's an extremely beloved title that is often considered one of, if not the best in the series. I mean, it's series creator Yuji Horí's favorite, which definitely says something. It's even the entry they made into a movie. The game spans multiple time periods where you go from playing with your dad to eventually your kids. It's super cool and to this day, still something very few games have done. Fast forwarding a few months to July, Final Fantasy 1 and 2 Dawn of Souls would come out for the Game Boy Advance. These are, once again, remakes of the first two games. These versions have some bonus dungeons and some other small changes. Yeah, not a lot to say here.
Game Boy Advance.
ずっと忘れていた約束を今から守るんだ。自分を見失って心が空っぽになるだけだ。
闇に負けない勇気を持って。
Kingdom Hearts Chain of Memories.
In November, Kingdom Hearts Chain of Memories would come out for the Game Boy Advance. This was a direct sequel to the first game that would lead into Kingdom Hearts 2, which would come out next year. As opposed to the original, it had some card-based gameplay, which was a bit divisive with fans, myself included. Despite that though, it still reviewed pretty well. A lot of praise went to the visuals, the FMVs in particular. This one did eventually get a full 3D remake later in the decade. It came out for the PS2 and even had some bonus content. Japan would get this as Disc 2 in Kingdom Hearts 2 Final Mix, and North America would get it as a standalone version.
ドラクエだ。よしやるぞ。
何も見えません。
俺はちょっと見えるぞ。モンスターは？半端ねえ。城が見えるぞ。
え、城？
どこまでも行けるぞ。見たい。
ドラゴンクエスト8、明日朝7時発売。
To finish off the year, later that month, Dragon Quest VIII Journey of the Cursed King would come out for the PS2. This was the first entry in the series to be developed by Level 5, the studio behind Dark Cloud 1 and 2. Square Enix was so impressed with these, they were like, hey, you guys want to make the next entry in the most popular JRPG series of all time? Yeah, pretty bold undertaking for a studio's third game, but they stepped up to the plate and hit that shit out of the park. This is my favorite game in the whole series. It's just so magical and charming. It captures that spirit of adventure so well. Visually, it was a gigantic leap from the previous entry, easily the biggest in the series. I think it's aged fantastically and is one of the best looking PS2 games, period. It's the first time we got to see Toriyama's character design brought to life in such detail. It's also the first time battles went full 3D and showed the characters acting out their actions. All this just helped it feel like the most immersive entry yet. Musically, it's also a huge standout. I think it's got some of the most memorable tracks in the series, like the Overworld song, Peak. Same with the characters. My boy Yangus is one of the all-time GOATs and I will hear nothing less. We stand Yangus around here, and that's that. But yeah, Dragon Quest VIII. Phenomenal game all around. Moving on to 2005, the first game Square Enix would develop was Musashi Samurai Legend. This was a follow-up to Brave Fencer Musashi on the PS1, and it's nowhere near as good. Gameplay is just super clunky and slow. Yeah, the original had some jank, but at least it was still fun. We have a whole hour-and-a-half video on it, check it out if you want. The sequel though, I don't know man, it's just not it. Plus, why do we sound like a surfer bro now?
I'm all set, Whisker Dude!
Hey, at least the actual music is pretty solid. Visually, the game also has a lot of style. Tetsuya Nomura did Tetsuya Nomura things, for sure, and the cell shading is extremely cell shaded. I mean, look at these black outlines. So thick, so prominent. By the way, if you like cell shading, we have a whole video on early cell shading. Check it out if you want. In April, Romancing Saga Minstrel Song would come out for the PS2. This was a remake of the original for the Super Famicom. The Saga games are known for being very complex and obtuse, so they designed this one with the intention of making it more approachable. Unlike Unlimited Saga, they actually included tutorials in-game. Unfortunately, critics didn't really care. It's still reviewed pretty bad. Well, in the West at least. Japan liked it. I like the visuals, the music, and the concept is playing as 8 different characters, but yeah, the game's not really for me. The next month, Japan would get Front Mission Online. As opposed to the tactical RPG gameplay of the previous entries, Front Mission Online took things in a more action-based direction. The server shut down in 2008 though, so it didn't seem to be a massive hit. Later in the month, Japan would also get Hanjuku Hero 4. This was the last game in the series and had the most unhinged intro yet. Yeah, what the hell's going on here? I don't know. I should have mentioned this earlier, but Nobuo Uematsu composed the music for all these games, and I guess he even made a cameo in this one. Yeah, kinda weird, but also pretty cool. Oh yeah, the series did get an RPG spin-off earlier in the year. However, it was developed by a different company, so I skipped over it. Well, until now at least. In October, we would get another Japanese-only release with Code H Commanders for the PS2. This was a very stylish action RPG where you play as 4 different characters in mission-based gameplay. It's got a super cool art style and the character design is definitely unique. Bro was rocking the OG broccoli cut. I guess the character design started with the hair and then they designed the character around that. Pretty interesting approach. I guess this was planned for a North American release and apparently they even finished the translation, but yeah, I guess they decided not to release it after all. It's a shame too, it looks really cool.
きな力を振り絞り撃って撃って撃ちまくれ。さらわれた仲間たちを救うためでっかい戦車で大バトル。ガンガン弾けてモリモリ進め。スライムモリモリドラゴンクエスト2大戦車と尻尾だ。12月1日発売。
On the 1st of December, Dragon Quest Heroes Rocket Slime came out for the Nintendo DS. This was the second entry in the Slime sub-series, and unlike the first, this one did come out in North America. It's a really charming and fun time. One of those games that just puts a smile on your face. Critics thought so too. It reviewed pretty well.
Thank you.
A couple weeks later, Final Fantasy IV Advance would come out for the Game Boy Advance. This version featured a new translation, some quality of life improvements, and some extra post-game content. Both Final Fantasy V and VI would get the same treatment next year. I like these versions a lot. I think they're great. A week later, right before Christmas, Kingdom Hearts fans would finally get the true follow-up they've been waiting for. Kingdom Hearts 2. Man, I didn't think they could top the simple and clean commercial, but somehow they did. Sanctuary might even go even harder. Hikaru Utada really is that girl. This is widely considered to be the peak of the series. It picks up right where Kingdom Hearts left off, just after a few hours of playing as a new character no one knows anything about. Yeah, this confused a lot of people at first. Of course, it makes sense later, but initially everyone was like, okay, where's Sora and what is going on? It did get people intrigued though. Story aside, Kingdom Hearts 2 focused more on combat rather than platforming and exploration. I mean, the combat is a lot better, for sure. However, I do kinda prefer the first Kingdom Hearts level design. There's just more verticality and area to explore. Kingdom Hearts 2 worlds kinda feel more like corridors. The pacing is much tighter though, I will say that. I meant to say this during the first Kingdom Hearts section, but I've always really liked the UI and the HUD in these games. There's just something very aesthetic about it, I don't know. Speaking of aesthetic, if I had to pick one game in this video that best encapsulates the overall Square Enix vibe and aesthetic this decade, it'd probably be this one. Before wrapping things up here, I do gotta give credit to the music. Yoko Shimomura composed her ass off. I think Dearly Beloved is one of the greatest musical tracks in gaming. It's a simple melody that evokes so much emotion. It always hits me with a blast of nostalgia right in the feels. Truly a masterpiece. After all this, 2005 was still not done. Right before the new year, Front Mission 5, Scars of the War, would come out for the PS2 in Japan. Not the West though. You see, in order to understand the story, you needed to play every single game in the series up until this point. And considering not every game even released in the West, it makes sense why this one didn't come out over here. It really sucks too, because a lot of fans consider it the pinnacle of the series. There is an English fan translation though, so leave it to the fans to give the fans what the fans want.
彼女が幸せなら構わない。ダージアブ・ケルベロス、ファイナルファンタジー7。プレイステーション。
The first game Square Enix would develop in 2006 was Dirge of Cerberus, Final Fantasy VII, in January. This was a spin-off of Final Fantasy VII, starring Vincent Valentine of that game. It was one of the earliest entries in the Final Fantasy VII Extended Universe, the first of which being Before Crisis, released in 2004 on mobile. I didn't talk about this one earlier because the initial list I was looking at didn't include mobile games, but it's a 2D, side-scrolling action RPG featuring the Turks. And then in 2005, there was Advent Children, a CGI movie, and Last Order, a Japanese-only OVA. There's more later we'll talk about, but I just wanted to get us caught up to speed. Back to Dirge of Cerberus. It takes place 3 years after the events of Final Fantasy VII and plays as a third-person shooter RPG. It's kinda mid though, not gonna lie, it didn't review that well. And this is even after they improved it for the North American release. They made you move faster, reload faster, they added a double jump, mid-air attacks, and yeah, it's still just kinda mid. The Japanese version did have an online mode though, which was somewhat cool. But yeah, it's not a bad game, it's just sorta painfully mediocre.
Savior Enix シリーズ15周年。時が流れ、今。聖剣プロジェクト第1弾。驚きと感触が連鎖する新しいアクション RPG。マナをめぐる新たな運命の物語。聖剣伝説 DS Children of Mana.
In March, Children of Mana released for the DS. It was co-developed by Square Enix and Next Entertainment. Even though it's a part of the Mana series, it's more of a spin-off and part of a sub-series within that series called World of Mana. This one takes more of a dungeon crawling approach and it's just okay. It does have multiplayer up to 4 players though, so that's pretty cool. Later that month, Final Fantasy XII came out for the PS2. This entry was spearheaded by Yasumi Matsuno and Hiroyuki Ito, the director of Final Fantasy VI and Final Fantasy IX. Looking at it in hindsight, it's pretty easy to see where their styles come into play. I mean, first of all, it was set in the fictional world of Ivalice created by Matsuno, the same world that Final Fantasy Tactics and Vagrant Story were set in. It's a high fantasy, medieval setting that always has a lot of political drama. Final Fantasy XII, however, takes place in a different time period with more of a Mediterranean medieval influence. This time period of Ivalice has different races of species inhabiting the world, which I think is where Ito's influence comes into play. Well, that's my theory at least. Final Fantasy IX had a lot of different races, so it makes sense to me. Okay, well I guess I'm not too sure about that, but what I am sure on is that he's credited for creating the Gambit system. This allowed you to automate the actions of your party members based on a highly specific, customizable set of commands. It's a really cool system that gives you a near endless amount of strategy. Oh yeah, I guess I should probably address the obvious here. This was the first mainline Final Fantasy not to feature turn-based combat. It went for more of a MMORPG approach, and same with the exploration. As fun as all this is, it was a pretty big departure from previous entries. It's when the series started feeling a little less Final Fantasy to me. I know some people say that about 10 due to the lack of an overworld map, but for me, it wasn't until 12 till I noticed it. All that said, I still love the game though, it's a lot of fun. It gave us some great characters, keyword on some.
I play the leading man, who else?
Fawn, you just do not get it, do you?
Hitoshi Sakamoto's music was excellent, and the presentation was just gorgeous. I'm more of a 10 guy myself, personally, but I do recognize the greatness of 12. It's one of the finest on the PS2. The next year, an expanded version titled Final Fantasy XII International Zodiac Job System came out in Japan. This version greatly expanded upon the license boards and added some quality of life improvements. It's without a doubt the definitive version. The West wouldn't get it though until a full decade later. Hey, better late than ever, right? On April 20th, nice, Dragon Quest Young Yangus and the Mystery Dungeon would come out in Japan on the PS2. This is another entry in the Mystery Dungeon series starring, well, Yangus, obviously. A young Yangus, that is, as it's a prequel to Dragon Quest VIII. We explore more of his backstory with Red, among other things. Hell, even Tornico's here. Being Japan only, I haven't played this one, but I am a big fan of the cel-shaded visuals. In August, Final Fantasy III would get a full 3D remake for the DS. This version changed a lot. The characters are given personalities now. There's new dialogue, a new job system, new jobs in general, new side quests, and a lot more. So yeah, this version is like playing a totally different game. Just to save time later, Final Fantasy IV would get a similar treatment the following year. Hell, this version even had voice acting, and it's really good.
Listen to me. We did no more than what our kingdom's peace and prosperity required us to do.
It's also pretty damn hard. Easily the hardest version of the game, and one of the hardest in the series, period. On December 14th, Final Fantasy Fables Chocobo Tales would come out for the DS. This was developed by the studio Hand and is a pretty unique game. It's like a 3D adventure game with turn-based card battles and a lot of minigames. It's got a strong picture book and fairy tale aesthetic and is quite cozy. One week later, Dawn of Mana came out for the PS2. This was the 8th entry in the Mana series and the 3rd entry in the World of Mana subseries. The 2nd entry in the World of Mana subseries was Friends of Mana, which came out a couple months ago. Forgot to mention it then because it's a mobile game. Dawn of Mana was the first time the series went full 3D, and it went not that well. I mean, it looks and sounds nice, but that's about it. The gameplay just has a lot of issues and is very repetitive. It's not even really an RPG anymore. Your stats reset after each level, so there's no long-term progression. Kinda lame. Yeah, this is widely considered to be the worst game in the series.
Let me do it! I can cast the spell!
Pipe down, will ya? I don't think a spell is gonna work on this one.
The Dragon Quest series continues with Dragon Quest Monsters Joker. Scout and train the ultimate team. You can compete in the Wildcard World Cup over Nintendo Wi-Fi connection and become the world's greatest monster scout. Dragon Quest Monsters Joker, only for Nintendo DS. Rated everyone 10 and up. Collecting the best doesn't come easy.
The last game Square Enix would release in 2006 was Dragon Quest Monsters Joker for the DS. Unlike the last entry, this one did come out in the West. It's also the first time the series went 3D. And to be honest, I don't really have a whole lot to say here. It's just more Dragon Quest monster goodness. The first game of 2007 that Square Enix would release would be Heroes of Mana in March. Yeah, the 3rd Mana game in a year. Well, actually 4, counting Friends of Mana. This installment was co-developed by Square and Brownie Brown. Gameplay-wise, it might have been the biggest departure yet. It's a real-time strategy game. Kinda just an okay one though. It reviewed a bit better than Dawn of Mana, but not that much better. Again, the music and the visuals got some praise, however, that's kind of it. At the end of March, Kingdom Hearts 2 Final Mix came out for the PS2. This added some new scenes and content and is the definitive version. The first Kingdom Hearts also got a similar treatment, however, I forgot to mention it back then. What I did mention earlier though is how the 3D remake of Chain of Memories came on disc 2. Other than that, I'm just retreading previous ground, so let's move on. The next month in April, Final Fantasy I got a port to the PSP. This was the best version of the game thus far. It featured the new graphics and FMV cutscenes from Origins, the bonus dungeons from Dawn of Souls, and an extra bonus dungeon exclusive to this version. Final Fantasy II also got a similar port later in the year. It's an excellent version as well.
Final Fantasy XII Revenant Wing.
The following week, Final Fantasy XII would get a sequel on the DS with Revenant Wings. Square Enix teamed up with the studio Think and Feel to put this one out. It's a real-time strategy game that follows the adventures of Vaughn and Pinello as they become sky pirates. It was made to be a lot more lighthearted than the original to have a broader appeal. As a standalone title, it's not bad. It got pretty good reviews and the visuals were praised a lot. In May, Final Fantasy Tactics got an enhanced version for the PSP titled War of the Lions. This version gave us new cutscenes, new voice acting.
There are things beyond the power of our changing, Ramsa. Try though we might.
Do not say that. If a thing can be endeavored, it
will endeavor? Grant me an army?
New characters, new classes, a new script, and yeah, it added a lot. Up until the recent remake, it was probably the best way to play it. Hey, it's still the only way to play as everyone's favorite leading man, Balthier, so that's certainly something. In July, Dragon Quest Swords, The Masked Queen and the Tower of the Mirrors came out for the Wii. This one was co-developed by the studios Genius Sonority and 80. You remember that Japanese TV add-on game from earlier in the video with the really long name that's too long for me to try to pronounce again? Well, this is a sequel to that. It's a similar type of on-the-rails experience, just using a Wiimote instead. Yeah, pretty natural trajectory, I'd say. As an overall game though, it's fine. It's pretty fun for a bit, but the gimmick kinda wears off quick. Later in the month, The World Ends With You would release for the DS. This was co-developed by Bow Square and the studio Jupiter. It's a very stylish action RPG that takes place in modern-day Shibuya. It has a really big focus on Japanese street culture and fashion. In fact, fashion trends even heavily play into the gameplay. Critically, it did extremely well. The unique gameplay was praised as well as the visual presentation and the soundtrack. And yeah, can't confirm, bangers galore. In August, Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles Ring of Fates would come out for the DS. This was the second entry in the Crystal Chronicles subseries. We got quite a few more of them coming up too. This one's a party-based action RPG with some light puzzle solving. There's also a multiplayer mode, so that's pretty cool. Critically, it just did okay though. In September, Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII would release for the PSP. This is another spin-off in the Final Fantasy VII compilation and is by far the most popular. It's the best received too, as it reviewed quite well. Hell, I'd even say it's the second most popular spin-off in the entire series, only behind Tactics. It's an action RPG following Zack Fair from FF7. It's a prequel to that game, and that's probably about all I should say. You know, spoilers and all that. Excellent title though. Oh yeah, one thing I guess I will point out is that a character in the game, Genesis, was actually voiced by and modeled after Gact, a super popular Japanese rock and pop star. Oddly enough, none of his music was included in this game, even though some was featured in Dirge of Cerberus. I I went through a bit of a gagged phase myself back then, not gonna lie. Secret Garden, Miserable, and For My Dear are all certified bangers. The next month in October, Final Fantasy Tactics A2 Grimoire of the Rift would come out for the DS. This is the third entry in the Tactics sub-series, and to this date, the last game set in the Ivalice world. It's a real shame too, because it's a really cool setting. Also because A2 wasn't the best note to go out on. I mean, it looks great, sounds great, and even plays great. However, the story does not read great. The original had such an amazing story, so compared to that one, it's a pretty big letdown. I think that was the main problem with a lot of these later 2000s spin-offs they were putting out. The stories just weren't that good. It almost felt like it was watering down their brand and identity a bit. Plus, this game probably has, like, the worst designed character I've ever seen in a JRPG. Like, what the hell is going on here? Shit talking aside though, I guess a review decent. In November, Dragon Quest IV, Chapters of the Chosen, would come out for the DS. This was a 3D remake co-developed by Cattle Call and Art Piazza. It's an excellent version of the game, minus one minor nitpick. No party chat. This allowed you to, well, chat with your party, and it's not in this version. It wasn't the mobile port the following decade though, which actually kinda makes that version better. Yeah, probably the first and only time you'll hear that about a mobile port. Dragon Quest V and VI would get similar remakes in the coming years, and fortunately, these versions did have party chat. It was also the first time they could officially be played in the West. To finish off this very packed year, December would bring us Final Fantasy Fables Chocobo's Dungeon for the Wii. This is another entry in the Chocobo Mystery Dungeon series. It's a bit different though, as it features a job system. It's a nice touch to give things more variety. The next year, this would get a port to the DS with extra content. This version not only has some new jobs, but a new playable scenario with Sid. Pretty cool. And to start off 2008, March would give us Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles My Life as a King for the Wii. Only as a digital title for the WiiWare though. And considering the Wii shop is closed, that means there's no longer an official way to play this game. Officially, that is. Emulation is a thing. But yeah, still an unfortunate and interesting fact. My Life as a King is a city building simulation game, and it's actually not bad for what it is. Basically, you're the ruler of a new kingdom where you build a town, give jobs to citizens, and manage resources. It's a pretty addictive gameplay loop. This would actually get a follow-up the next year, titled My Life as a Dark Lord, also on the WiiWare and also cannot be played today, officially. This one switched up genres though and is a tower defense game. It's a pretty fun take on the genre, you know, nothing crazy, but pretty fun. In May, Front Mission 2089 Border of Madness would get released for the DS. This is an enhanced remake of Front Mission 2089 and 2089 too. Kinda. You see, these were two mobile games that came out the previous years. Border of Madness is a remake of the first game, and just a summarized, abridged version of the second game. But yeah, there's a lot of extra content in this version. There's new graphics, new characters, new branching storyline paths, and yeah, a lot. Unfortunately, it is Japan only though, so there's that. A few months later in August, Sigma Harmonix would come out for the DS. This was co-developed by Bow Square and Think Garage. It's a time-traveling, murder mystery RPG set in an alternate version of Tokyo with card-based battles that are influenced by the music. Yeah, pretty unique. Unfortunately, this one never came out of Japan though. I don't think a fan translation exists either. The OST is on YouTube though, and I recommend checking it out. One of the more underrated OSTs in this video in my opinion. It was composed by Masashi Hamauzu, who I'll be talking more about in just a bit. The next month, Soul Eater Monotone Princess would come out for the Wii. It was co-developed by both Square and the studio Bones. It's a hack-and-slash action title based on the anime of the same name. Again, this one never saw release outside of Japan, nor have I seen the anime, and so I don't have a whole lot to say here. On November 20th, we would actually get 2 releases. A port of Chrono Trigger on the DS, and The Last Remnant on the Xbox 360. The Chrono Trigger port had the anime cutscenes from the PS1 port, a new translation, some quality of life improvements, and some new optional dungeons. Now I don't think these new dungeons are that great, but hey, they are optional. Alright, The Last Remnant. This is a pretty complex game. I mean, it did start off development as a Saga game after all, if that tells you anything. I remember getting this for Christmas and being pretty hyped about it. The graphics looked so good, the character design was creative, and yeah, it just looked like a fun experience. And it was, for the most part. Battles are just very convoluted and confusing. They're large scale and split up into squads, but you don't really control them directly. Instead, you give them vague orders based on... I don't really know actually, they kind of just appear at random. At least it feels that way. It's not a bad game, but it's definitely not for everyone. As you can imagine, it received pretty mixed reviews. In December, Chocobo Tales, The Witch, The Girl, and the 5 Heroes would get released for the DS. This was a Japan-only sequel to the other Chocobo Tales game. There's not a whole lot of info on this one out there, but it seems to play pretty similar to the first. Super gorgeous art style too. The last game we have for 2008 is Dissidia Final Fantasy on the PSP. This was a fighting game featuring a bunch of different characters from the series. It was really cool to see characters from the earliest Final Fantasies be recreated in such detail. The game was a pretty big hit too. Hell, a newer version is still being played in Japanese arcades today. We saw them a lot during our trip last year. Speaking of other versions, the North American version the following year would have a lot of extra content. Japan would also later get this version under the title Universal Tuning. Alright, and this brings us to our final year of 2009. It's been a long journey, my friends, but we are on the home stretch. To start it off, in January, Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles Echoes of Time would get a dual release for the Wii and the DS. Yeah, 2 versions. Aside from the graphical differences though, they pretty much play the same. It's actually a sequel to Ring of Fates. It plays like a more refined, polished version of that game. In this one though, you can play as your custom character in single player, and the multiplayer mode can also be played online in addition to local. In March, Kuroshitsuji Phantom and Ghost would come out in Japan for the DS, otherwise known as Black Butler, a popular manga and anime series. The game plays as a choose-your-own adventure game. While it never got an official release over here, there is an English fan translation. If you're a fan of the series, it might be worth checking out. 2 months later in May, Kingdom Hearts 358 Days Over 2 would get released for the DS. Yeah, I'll just say it, not really the best name from a marketing standpoint. If like half the audience doesn't even know how to pronounce it, that's not good. I mean, it does have meaning and makes sense in a thematic way, but still, you probably could have conveyed that better. Say what you want about Nomura, but he was certainly a man of ideas. As far as the actual game goes, it follows the characters Roxas, Xion, and Axel over the course of 358 days, leading into the events of Kingdom Hearts 2. We saw Roxas and Axel in that game, but Xion is new here. Fans seem to be kind of split on this one. On one hand, the emotional story gets a lot of praise, but the clunkier gameplay is considered a bit of a weak point. On June 1st, Final Fantasy IV: The After Years would get ported to the Wii. This was a sequel to Final Fantasy IV, obviously, given the name, that initially came out in episodic installments for mobile. It takes place 17 years after the original, following some of the same characters and their descendants. It's okay. Kind of feels a little fan-fiction-y if I'm being honest. If you're a big fan of the original, it's maybe worth playing. However, if not, yeah, I don't know. That 69 on Metacritic kinda says it all. A few weeks later, Dragon Quest Wars would release for the DS, more specifically the DSiWare service. It was actually developed by Intelligent Systems, the team behind the Paper Mario series and Fire Emblem. This one's also a tactical RPG. Quite a bit more simple though. There's no story here, it's all about the gameplay.
Dragon Quest IX 星空の守り人
July would bring us the last Dragon Quest title of the video, Dragon Quest IX, Sentinels of the Starry Skies. Like the previous mainline title, this one was also developed by Level 5. However, it was the first mainline entry to be on a handheld. It's also the first one that lets you create your own character. Not only that, but it's the first with multiplayer as well. So yeah, by all accounts, this was the biggest departure yet. How did their experiment pay off? Well, and pretty damn well. In Japan. It sold 2.3 million units in 2 days. The multiplayer and online elements were a huge hit and allowed for a lot of gatherings and communities to be formed. Now, how did it fare in North America? Well, barely over 100K in its first month. On its own, that's not bad at all, but compared to Japan, yeah, not as good. Still reviewed pretty well though. Not gonna lie, despite being a big DQ fan, upon release, I did skip this one myself. Seems to have a lot of depth with the class system though, I gotta check it out. The next month in August, Blood of Bahamut would come out for the DS. So, I'm kinda making an exception here. Square did not develop this game. Instead, it was the studio Think and Feel, the developers behind Final Fantasy XII Revenant Wings. It was also directed by Motomu Toriyama, who had a prominent role in Bahamut Lagoon, surprise surprise, Final Fantasy X, and even directed Final Fantasy X-2. He would later go on to direct Final Fantasy XIII as well. So yeah, all that considered, this one still seemed relevant to bring up. The game takes place in a city built on the back of a gigantic beast, Xenoblade looking a little sus right now, where you defended in action RPG combat. There's also a multiplayer aspect as well. This game features a lot of nods to the Final Fantasy series, with some of the beasts being called Bahamut, obviously, Ifrit, Shiva, Gilgamesh, and etc. I thought that was cool. I think the sprite work is really cool too. Apparently Square was approached with the opportunity to localize this one, but they were like, nah, we're good. The next month, in September, Saga 2 Hiho Densetsu, known in North America as Final Fantasy Legend 2, would get a full 3D remake for the DS. This was quite the overhaul compared to the original. I mean, not only did we add a new dimension, but we also added, the color. While this one never got an official North American release, there is an English fan translation online. In October, Final Fantasy: The Four Heroes of Light would come out for the DS. It was developed by Matrix Software, a name you've already heard numerous times. After the success of the Final Fantasy 3 and 4 remakes, Square was like, well, you guys just want to make your own game? I mean, it still had the Final Fantasy title, it was just an original story. And it was, fine. Not bad, but not amazing. A sequel was talked about, but eventually it just turned into Bravely Default, which ended up being a better game. A couple weeks later in November, Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles: The Crystal Bearers would get released for the Wii. This would be the final entry in the Crystal Chronicles sub-series, and unlike the previous titles, it was focused on single player only. This is what a lot of fans seemingly wanted, myself included, so how did it go? Well, not that well. It both reviewed and sold the lowest out of any Crystal Chronicles game thus far. The music and visuals were good, as usual, but the game's only like 10 hours long and the gameplay is, well, it kinda sucks. Well, that's not fair to say. The controls and camera just aren't that great. The telekinetic powers mechanic is pretty cool though. Messing around with NPCs is a lot of fun. Battles, not as much. This would ultimately mark the end of the Crystal Chronicles sub-series. I respect them wanting to try new things, but in the end, it was just a failed experiment that only watered down the Final Fantasy name. Hey, if you like these games, that's great. I'm not saying they're bad and shouldn't have been made, I just don't think they needed the Final Fantasy title.
Gotcha. Okay.
Holy shit, we are finally at the last game. It's quite a fitting one to end on as well. While we would start the decade with one of the most traditional Final Fantasy titles, we would end it with one of the most untraditional, Final Fantasy XIII.
あんたが生きて戦うために誰かの希望を壊した。また会えるよな。
必ず会えるだろ。ファイナルファンタジー13 PlayStation 3
Oh, Final Fantasy XIII. Where to even begin? This still remains one of the most polarizing entries in the series. On paper, you wouldn't even think it either. I mean, there's a brooding, stoic hero, turn-based combat, a unique, fantastical setting, and yeah, a lot of what you'd come to expect in a Final Fantasy title is here.
Wow!
On the surface. Okay, let me just preface this by saying, I don't mind linearity. In fact, in most cases, I prefer it. It's just one reason why I prefer JRPGs over Western RPGs. So, all that said, Final Fantasy XIII pretty much just plays like a pretty hallway simulator set to Masashi Hamazu bangers. You might as well just think of the first 80% of the game as like an interactive music video to his new album. I mean, there's linear and then there's this. Most of the game is just cutscenes, battles, and walking forward. It does open up way later in the game, just too little too late. I don't think Final Fantasy XIII is a bad game. There's a lot of very nice individual ingredients. The visual presentation is stunning. The music is incredible, the paradigm system is interesting, and the setting of the world is one of the series' most creative. I just think they could have been packaged together differently. Like a lot of important lore and terminology being explained in optional data logs, like, come on, what are we doing here? Going back to the music though, I want to point out how cursed the composer Masashi is. He went from Unlimited Saga to Musashi Samurai Legend to Dirge of Cerberus, and now this. He made the most banger OSTs to some of their decade's shittiest games. His music is the best part about all these games. They did not let this dude cook on anything good. But yeah, I just wanted to give the guy some credit. I feel like he doesn't get talked about as much compared to their other top composers. Make no mistake though, he was on their dream team starting 5 with Nobuo Uematsu, Yoko Shimomura, Yasunori Mitsuda, and Hitoshi Sakamoto. Man, what a legendary crew. That's the God Squad right there. But yeah, anyway, Final Fantasy XIII. Maybe overhated to some extent, but it's also not hard to see where that criticism comes from. And you know, I think I kind of feel similarly about Square Enix post-merging. A lot of people say things were never the same after the merging and it all went downhill since, and while I do think that's a bit overdramatic, I'd be lying if I said I didn't think there was at least a little truth in there. It kind of seems like they started focusing more on quantity over quality. I mean, they always had a large output, but it just felt more focused. Like in the 90s, they were just doing one console and one handheld at a time. In the mid-2000s though, you had the PS2, the Wii, the PSP, the DS, mobile games. In an attempt to capture every market, they probably spread themselves too thin. let's be honest, they also started to milk some franchises. Final Fantasy is an obvious example, but they're not alone. Like, did we really need 4 Mana games in 2 years? Secret of Mana is a Super Nintendo classic, and Legend of Mana is a cult classic, but no one cared about these. People were probably like, well, it plays completely different, and it's probably mid, so why should I care? It just ruined the name. There's a reason why I didn't get another mainline installment until like 20 years later. It's like they no longer felt confident in making a game that wasn't tied to a pre-existing franchise. Instead, they try to do new things while still tying it to already established IPs that weren't known for the new things they were trying to do, in result, confusing consumers on what they should come to expect with that particular franchise. Here's an absolutely insane fact. Out of the games they made themselves in the 2000s, in North America, they only released 2 original titles that weren't part of another series: The World Ends With You and The Last Remnant, the latter of which barely even counts as the start of development as a Saga game. Original titles like Code H Commanders and Sigma Harmonix, they did not feel confident bringing over. Compare that to the 90s where they were creating new IPs right and left. I feel like they started doing too many ports and remakes as well. Like, come on, give us something original here. All that said, it's not all bad post-merging though. We would still get some of the finest titles in the company's entire history with Kingdom Hearts 2, Final Fantasy XII, and Dragon Quest VIII. However, overall, they just weren't quite as consistent as they were the previous decade. Still a lot of quality gems, just some more forgettable ones as well. In a life where we can choose to either look at the elixir bottle half full or half empty though, I'm gonna hoard 99 of them until the end of the game and remember the good times. It was an extremely memorable decade of my life, and Square Enix, you guys played your part in that. Thanks for the memories. Alright, and that about wraps up this video. Thanks for watching everyone, we hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please either consider hitting that like button or subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. Man, this one ended up being a lot longer than I initially planned on. Didn't expect it to be twice as long as our 90s Squaresoft video, but here we are. I still missed a few as well. Dragon Quest and Final Fantasy and Itadaki Street Special, the Dragon Quest Monster Battle Road arcade games, and maybe the odd mobile game. I don't think you guys care too much about those, but still. Which ones do you care about though? Or what's your favorite game in this whole video? Let us know in the comments below. As always, just want to give a huge shout out to our Patreon supporters, and of course an extra special shout out to our top patrons: Chris Carnaccio, Derek Drost, Jam, Jesse Spencer, J-Ho, Joe Bro the Hobo, J Shaw Drums, Jump Rock, and Spankwise. All of your generosity and support is very much appreciated. Other than that, thanks again for watching everyone, and hope you have an awesome day. This is Corbin from Gaming Productions. Until next time.
You smiled at me. I said, don't let me what I love you, but just let me have to be your father. When we are older, you're right. Is that what I meant when I said no? I don't think life is quite that simple when you are away. You don't hear me say please, oh baby, you're simple and plain is the way that you make me feel.